Day 7. I woke to the sound of birds. That should have been comforting. Instead, it felt wrong. Birds don't sing when men are moving through the trees. They don't waste breath when danger is close. Their voices told me the enemy had paused, not withdrawn, but reconsidering. That pause was deliberate. The air was cool, the sky clear, the kind of morning pilots love. From my position, I could see the runway below, a pale scar cutting through the valley. Aircraft sat waiting, engine silent. I sent no patrols north, not today. The ground we had given up yesterday was now theirs, and walking into it blind would only feed them information. Instead, I sent 2 men west along the tree line, slow and wide, to see if the pressure was spreading. By mid-morning, the first probing fire came, not from the north, but from the west. Short bursts and controlled. They weren't trying to kill us. They were testing how fast would we respond. From where? And with how much discipline? I waited longer than my men would like before giving the order. When we did fire, it was measured, deliberate, with no shouting. Just enough to say we are still organized. The enemies faded quickly as they always do. The scouts returned in the afternoon reporting that the west was active. Not heavy activities, but active. Evidence of movement along the ridges. Enemies shifting positions and likely setting up future routes. The enemy wasn't focusing on one direction anymore. They were shaping the valley. I gathered the platoon in the late afternoon. We sat low, backs against earthworks, rifles across knees, faces streaked with dirt and sweat. Some of them had the 1,000-yard stare already, not from combat, but from anticipation. "We hold," I said. "We don't chase ghosts. Let them come to us." No one argued. As the sun dipped, the wind picked up, carrying smells from the jungle. Damp earth, rot, distant cooking fires, enemy fires, I suspected. They were close enough now to eat hot food, and that knowledge stung more than hunger. Every man was alert. Fingers rested near triggers, and eyes scanned shadows that shifted with the wind. Night fell without an attack, but the jungle was no longer quiet. There were sounds now. Boots brushing leaves, a cough suppressed too late, metal touching metal, sometimes very close. I knew better than to fire blindly. The enemy wanted that, a tracer, a muzzle flash, anything to fix our position. So we waited in the darkest hours, when fatigue pressed hardest. I felt doubt creep in, not doubt in my men, but doubt in time itself. How long could we do this? Days, weeks? Then I remembered something an older commander once told me. Sieges are won by men who endure boredom longer than fear. I repeated that to myself until dawn thinned the sky. Day 7 ended without a decisive clash, but by then, the valley felt smaller. The walls felt closer, and Long Tieng no longer felt like a place. It felt like a position. Day 8. The sky was already busy when I woke up this morning. Aircraft engines echoed through the valley before the sun cleared the ridges, a deep rolling sound that vibrated in the chest. And that sound meant our General Vang Pao was worried. It also meant we had a voice today, not just rifles, but radios and Hmong men who spoke to the sky. Hmong forward air controllers arrived mid-morning, moving carefully, heads down, radios hugged close like lifelines. I met them under tree cover, maps spread on the ground, weighted at the corners with stones. I showed them what I'd been seeing for days. The northern ridges where mortar flashes had winked, tree lines where movement never quite stopped, gullies that funneled men and supplies like veins. I didn't exaggerate. Hmong airmen can smell panic the way soldiers smell blood. I spoke calmly, pointed precisely, trusted them to understand the rest, and they did. By late morning, the first Hmong T-28 aircraft screamed overhead, a warning written in sound. I watched the ridge lines through binoculars and saw enemies' movement scatter, dissolve, and hide. The enemy knew that sound too. When the bombs came, they came hard. The mountains answered back with thunder, dirt and smoke climbed into the sky. Even from our positions, the shock hit like a punch to the ribs. Some men flinched. Others smiled grimly, not with joy, but with relief. For a few hours, the pressure eased. We used that time well. I had squads recheck fields of fire, reinforce overhead cover, and redistribute ammunition. I moved the machine gun again, just a few meters, improving its angle into a gully I suspected would matter later. War rewards those who work when they're given air. In the afternoon, enemy fire was almost non-existent. No probing, no shots, just silence. But this time a wounded silence. I knew better than to think the enemy was broken. They were adjusting, learning how to survive bombs, learning where the sky couldn't reach. That night, the jungle sounded different, less confident, fewer voices, more distance. I allowed the men to heat food for the first time in days, briefly, carefully, under cover. Warm rice does things from around no speech ever could. As darkness settled, I felt something unfamiliar, the sense that for this one day, we had pushed back instead of being pushed. I lay back in my fighting hole, helmet still on, listening to aircraft fade into the distance. Somewhere, enemy soldiers were counting their dead, redrawing their plans, just as we were. Day 8 did not end the siege, but it reminded us of something essential. We were not alone in this valley, and the sky still knew our names. Day 9. The smell came first. Burned earth has a particular weight to it, sharp, bitter, and heavy in the back of the throat. When I woke, it still hung in the air from yesterday's strikes, carried down from the ridgelines by the night wind. Smoke drifted low in places where the jungle canopy had been torn open. The enemy had been hit hard, but wounded animals do not become harmless. They become careful. The morning was unusually clear, no fog, no haze. The valley lay open and exposed, every line sharp. I didn't like that. Clear days invite observation, and observation invites plans. We stayed quiet. No patrols beyond immediate security. No unnecessary movement. I told the men to drink water slowly, to eat even if they didn't feel hungry, because fatigue creeps in quietly, like a sickness. By mid-morning, we saw movement again. Not large groups, not careless, just small enemies' teams shifting positions on the ridges bombed yesterday. The enemy had learned something important on day 8, where the sky was deadly and where it was not. Around noon, sporadic fire cracked from far north. Not aimed at us yet, more like signaling, a way to tell each other they were still there, still connected. I resisted the urge to respond and let them speak to each other, while we remain invisible. In the afternoon, Hmong T-28 aircraft returned with more strikes, but were short runs this time, more precise. I adjusted our positions again, anticipating retaliation that never quite came. The men were quieter today, not frightened, reflective. Bombing gives soldiers time to think, and thinking can be dangerous. I walked among them, checked straps, nodded, touched shoulders. Presence matters more than words. As the sun dipped, the smoke settled into the valley again, tinting everything orange. The ridgelines looked wounded and scarred. I wondered how many enemy soldiers were buried beneath those fresh wounds. That night, the jungle stayed mostly silent. No probing fire, no voices, no movement that were close enough to hear. That silence was different from day 4 silence. This one felt like a pause between breaths. Not preparation, but recovery. I lay awake long after my eyes closed, replaying the last 9 days in my head. The pattern was clearer now. They were not rushing us. They were shaping us, learning where we bent, learning where we held. Day 9 ended without blood, but it ended with understanding. The enemy was still very much alive, and they were adapting. Day 10. The valley exhaled today. Not relief, just a long, tired breath. I woke with the sense that something had shifted, though I couldn't yet name it. The jungle sounded alive again. Insects buzzing, birds calling, leaves stirring in the breeze. After days of tension, that normalcy felt almost insulting. War has a way of punishing you for believing in quiet. We treated the day like a gift we didn't trust. Weapons were stripped, cleaned slowly, deliberately, along with ammunition redistributed again. I made each man show me his magazines, counted round with my own eyes, not because I didn't trust them, because scarcity sharpens discipline. Around mid-morning, I walked to the edge of our perimeter alone. I did this on days like this, when the enemy went still. You learn more by listening than by looking. From the north, nothing. From the west, nothing. From the east, only wind through trees, too clean. I returned and ordered slight adjustments, small, almost invisible shifts in positions. A machine gun moved 2 meters, a firing hole deepened just enough to hide a helmet rim. I didn't explain why. Commanders don't always need reasons that can be spoken. In the afternoon, heat pressed down hard, sweat pooled under body armor, flies gathered. Men grew irritable in quiet ways, snapping at straps, sighing too loudly. I sat with the youngest fighters and made them talk about home, about food, about anything not shaped like fear. One laughed too hard at a bad joke, then looked embarrassed. I let it pass. Late in the day, a single CIA Air America aircraft landed on the strip below us. Engines whining, tires biting dirt. Everyone watched it touch down like it was a miracle. I realized then how small our world had become. As evening fell, the sky turned sharp and clear, stars already waiting. No probes came, no shots, no mortars. I reminded the platoon, that quiet does not mean safe, and their heads nodded. They already knew. That night, I slept more than I had in days. Not deeply, not peacefully, but enough. I dreamed of walking uphill that never ended, the ground always rising just out of reach. I woke before dawn, heart steady, senses sharp. Day 10 ended without violence. But by then, I understood something important. The enemy was done learning. Soon, they would start taking. Day 11. The attack did not announce itself with noise. It announced itself with movement. I saw just after first light, when the valley was still blue with early morning cold, shapes where there had been none the day before, not careless silhouettes, disciplined ones, men moving in short bounds, hugging the folds of ground, using terrain like they'd studied it for weeks because they had. I felt the moment settle into my bones before the first shot was fired. This is it, the beginning of something that would not stop easily. I passed the word quietly down the line. No shouting, no running, just readiness, helmets tightened, rifles brought up, fingers resting near triggers. The first shots came from the north with control bursts. The enemy was advancing in layers. One element firing, another moving, then switching. Professional infantry, patient and confident. I let the enemies come closer, then I gave the signal. Our line answered as one. Machine guns opened first, ripping into the tree line. Rifles followed with deliberate aim. No panic fire, no screaming, just the flat, ugly sound of men trying to kill other men. The enemy reacted immediately, dropping, dispersing, and flanking. They weren't surprised. They'd expected resistance. By mid-morning, the northern hills were fully alive with gunfire echoed and folded back on itself. Mortars began to fall. Not yet accurate, but close enough to shake dirt loose from overhead cover. I moved constantly, from position to position, checking fields of fire, pulling men back when angles became bad, pushing others forward when gaps opened. A platoon commander doesn't fight with his rifle on days like this. He fights with his legs and his voice. One of our forward positions took heavy pressure around noon. The enemy had worked around the flank, using a gully we'd suspected but hadn't yet sealed. I cursed myself for that. We held anyway, barely. By early afternoon, it became clear the enemy wasn't trying to break us outright. They were fixing us in place, pinning us while other units maneuvered. That realization was worse than the bullets. I ordered a controlled fallback from the most exposed northern fighting holes. Not a retreat, a shortening of the line, traded ground for lives. The men executed it cleanly. That discipline saved us. As the sun dropped, the fighting tapered off, not because either side was finished, because both had learned enough for the day. The enemy pulled back just far enough to deny us easy targets, and we stayed where we were, breathing hard, hands shaking, ears ringing. I walked the line after dusk, checked wounds, counted heads. We had lost ground, we had lost men, but we were still there. That night, the jungle buzzed with sound again. Enemy voices, movement, digging. They were fortifying the ground they'd gained. I sat in my fighting hole long after the others tried to sleep, rifle across my knees, helmet pressing into my skull. Day 11 ended with a truth I could no longer ignore. The siege of Long Tieng had crossed a line, and from now on, every day would be paid for in blood, ground, and air. Day 12. I woke with my jaw clenched so hard my teeth hurt. That's how I knew the night hadn't really ended. It had only thinned enough to let light in. My ears still rang from yesterday's fighting. Every sound arrived late, like it had to travel through water before reaching my head. The enemy didn't wait long. As soon as the sun crested the ridgeline, mortar rounds began to fall again. Closer than before, more confident. The first one landed behind our shortened line, throwing dirt and rock over our positions. The second walked forward. The third landed where we had slept the night before. They had adjusted. I crawled along the line, shouting corrections directly into ears so the words wouldn't get lost in noise. Helmets were already dusted white with pulverized stone. Faces looked older than yesterday, and by mid-morning, rifle fire picked up from the east. That was new. Yesterday had been pressure from the north. Today, they widened the mouth of the trap. I could feel it, the way angles overlapped, the way fire no longer came from a single direction. The enemy wasn't rushing. They were shaping the battlefield like a craftsman shapes wood, shaving away options. The eastern ridgeline mattered more than I had wanted to admit. By noon, it was clear they knew that too, and the enemy infantry pushed hard along that slope, using trees and folds of ground with practiced ease. Our men held, firing downhill, but the terrain favored them. I watched through binoculars as enemy squads leapfrogged forward, disciplined and methodical. This wasn't militia work. This was an army. I called for air support as soon as the radio could catch a clean signal. The Hmong Forward Air Control answered, calm as always. I marked the ridgeline with smoke and prayed the wind would behave. While we waited, we fought. One of my machine gunners went down, shrapnel in the leg. He tried to wave it off, tried to keep firing. I dragged him back myself and shoved another man in a position. No ceremony and no speeches. War doesn't pause for sentiment. The bombs came in the early afternoon. The sound split the sky open. Hmong T-28 aircraft screamed low, dropping ordnance right along the eastern ridge. Trees vanished, dirt lifted, fire rolled. Even with ear protection, the noise punched through bone. The enemy scattered, but not blindly. They knew how to survive airstrikes now. But still, it bought us time, precious breathing time. When the smoke cleared, the ridge was scarred and broken. We had held it barely. As the afternoon dragged on, the firing slowed. The enemy pulled back just enough to deny us targets, just enough to make us wonder where they'd strike next. I gathered the platoon before dusk. No speeches, just adjustments. Reinforce the east. Watch the north. Trust nothing. That night, I watched flares arc into the sky and fall uselessly short. The jungle glowed and faded, glowed and faded. Somewhere out there, the enemy dug in again. Day 12 ended with our lines intact, but the cost was clear. The enemy had taken our measure. They knew where to press, and tomorrow they would press harder.